Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the HR Inside Summit. We're most certainly very happy to be taking up the stage this morning and to talk to you a little bit about our experience in implementing an HRIS platform at GoStudent, which is the organization we work for. But before I get into it, I just want to tell you a little story. About 2 weeks ago, we received a call from the event organizers here and said, listen, we've had a last-minute cancellation. Would you be interested in giving a presentation on your experience on implementing an HRIS platform? Now, this call went to my colleague, and after she freaked out a little bit, we sort of calmed down. And we said, yeah, sure, no problem, we can do that. And then the next question was, can you write up a description really quickly, because we have to print the programs and make sure that we get this out. And so more sort of like freaking out. But because we work in a scale-up, we're quite used to this level of chaos, and we were able to put something together fairly quickly. And the title that we came up with was Building for Efficiency. Now, this title can mean something or it can mean nothing, essentially. And so this is why we sort of, what you see in the program is a bit opaque. But what I do want to tell you is exactly what we're going to be covering in the next 25 minutes, which is we're going to tell our story and our journey on implementing an HRIS platform within a scale-up environment. So if you think about this, HRIS platform, what comes to mind? To my mind, it's usually about order, structure, a system, certainty. And then when you think about a scale-up, you're sort of on this side, which is a bit of disorder, a bit of uncertainty. And so our story, and it's a compelling story to tell, even though we were second choice, is how do you marry up something that you want to be stable and certain within an environment that most of the time is uncertain. So that's just setting the scene a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Do not expect, just to level set a little bit, any technical HRIS sort of like terms here. What we have done is try to make this as practical and pragmatic around our learning of going through this particular project. So we're not going to tell you how to configure your workbooks or how to configure your system. I don't think anyone wants to hear that. If I was in the stage, I wouldn't, in the audience, I wouldn't want to hear that either. What I want is practical tips so that I can, when I get to implementing a platform, that will help me, that I can keep in the back of my mind. Okay, so with that,
let's start with a show of hands. Who in this room has implemented an HRIS before or has been part of an implementation in some shape or form? Okay, a couple of people.
Yeah, more than I expected, actually. So that's fantastic. So we just have a couple of questions, right? So our next question is going to be, look, like, let's be honest and transparent here. For those of you that put in an HRIS system, did it look something like this? Or did it look something or more like that? So for those of you where it was easy, it was a breeze, not that complicated, who sort of like resonates with that statement? Yeah, no one. Yeah. Is there one? Oh, in the back. There's one? Okay. One is more than I thought we would get, actually, because it's not easy. It is complicated, and our experience at GoStudent most certainly was Kermit the Frog up there, where it was a bit messy. Yeah, a bit messy. But we'll get into that in a second. And so.
Last question, I promise. And just out of curiosity, anyone in this room about to implement an HRIS?
there's one. I think
Cool.
two.
If you're not, you're lucky.
Yeah, so good luck. It's a project, right? And like most projects, you have to plan for it carefully. There's all kinds of different components that you have to take into account, like from budgets all the way through to how you want to structure your data. But in the end, given our experience, it is not a waste of time. No matter the size of your talent organization or how many employees you have, that structure and process refinement that you get out of having a platform pays dividends, maybe not at the beginning as you work out sort of the kinks, but down the road, most certainly. And it has all those things that HR people always dream about, which is refined processes, clean data, and managers that are able to self-serve, essentially. Okay, very much aware that we haven't introduced ourselves yet, so we will in a second. This is what we're going to be covering today. We'll tell you a little bit about us and also the organization that we work for, and then we'll give you a sneak peek into the system that we chose, which was Workday. So we will talk about sort of our rationale and our thinking around why we chose Workday. We'll tell you about our use case of what we were trying to solve for. And then finally, what was our key learnings out of that, out of our process and our journey. So it is a compelling story. Hang in there. Practical tips to come in a second. So, who are we? We're GoStudent. We're an online tutoring platform. We were founded in 2016. We have co-founders. We operate in 15 markets, mostly across the EU. And we are a group company, meaning that we have other learning providers, such as HRIS, Seneca in the UK, and TUS Media in Spain.
For the Austrians here, Lernquadrat might resonate with you a bit more because you have a kid that's currently tutoring or were a kid like me that needed tutoring. So Lernquadrat is part of Studienkreis.
Okay, who we are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena. I'm the Senior Manager People Solutions at GoStudent. I've been at GoStudent for about 2 years and about 6 within the HRIS space. And this is actually my very first keynote presentation, which is slightly intimidating, but also really exciting.
Great. And I'm Paul. I head up the HR function at GoStudent. I have over 20 years of HR experience. And I'm here to encourage Elena and to support her because, truth be known, she did most of the heavy lifting in terms of putting in Workday at GoStudent. Okay, let's talk about why you're here. You're here to listen to us, hopefully. But before, let me sort of paint the picture around the context for GoStudent and for Workday. Essentially, this was kind of why we ran into issues around our HRIS platforms. Essentially, we were growing very, very rapidly as an organization. We were taking on a lot of customers and also doing acquiring of businesses. And so with that, businesses going up, you need more people to sort of help manage all that business. And when we started up as a scale-up, we were able to source a HRIS system that was fairly cost-efficient, that was very easy to use and had a very high UX. So the experience for our employees was excellent. But we soon found that we were running into internal sort of problems with managing all the onboarders and new talents that we were bringing on. And things were just beginning to fall apart because the system that we had in place was not built for the scale that we were actually aiming for. And so Elena's going to take us through a couple of examples of that scale hitting up against that HRIS platform.
So things we were a bit limited on were approval workflows. So you have the simple employee initiates something, manager approves it, but we needed something a bit more sophisticated than that, and I'm going to go into more example a bit later on. Secondly, which I think is really important for the HR people here, manager self-service. So we do wanted to enable our managers to do more within the system. Reporting and data accuracy. So everyone knows this, like data is really important. So we were limited when it came to effective data fields specifically. So it was very tricky to make data-driven decisions. Time tracking and absence. Anyone that has a business that operates specifically in different European countries knows that this can be a bit of a pain because there are so many regulations and very specific to the countries itself. So this was another thing that we just needed to solve for. No test environment. For the HR tech people, they understand what that means. So there was no option to test anything. Anything you did was live immediately, which caused confusion, and you kind of had to caveat what's going on if you needed to try something else. Inefficient use of our resources. So we had a lot of out-of-the-system work to make the data work for us, to do some sort of tracking, all these kind of things that we just couldn't really put in on our previous HR system. Last but not least, the US, very different requirements than the US. It was a US-based system that was not very accommodating to all these rules and regulations that we have within Europe. So it made it tricky for us to work with.
So taking all those things into consideration, we really needed to find something that was going to be fit for purpose and that was going to really line up with our needs. We needed something that was more suitable. So that was the urgency, that was sort of the issues that we were running up against. And we had a choice to make.
So we looked at 3 of the big systems out there, and all of those have pros and cons, and you will have to decide which one works for you. We looked at Oracle, we looked at SAP, SuccessFactors, and we looked at Workday, and like you already know, we chose Workday in the end. There were 3, if we have to put it down to 3 specific points, why we decided for Workday in the end. One was the reputation, a second was the user experience, and the third and probably most important one was the core HCM functionality that just wasn't really there with our previous HR system.
Excellent. And then the last point that I want to make here is, well, it's 2 points really. Sometimes normally when you choose an HRIS sort of platform, there's objective considerations and then subjective considerations. So the business case is always super important to get across and get that sign off from your executives and board level. Items that we used in order to proof our business case was less resources but more efficiency. And we really leveraged a lot of the data analytics that we can start pulling out of Workday in order to enable the business to make better decisions moving forward. So that's the objective sort of piece. And then the subjective piece is, we're all in HR. We all build up sort of relationships. We're in a people sort of like business, essentially. Sometimes we meet people that represent HRIS platforms, and that was our case. We had an excellent relationship with Workday from previous organizations. So for us, it was quite easy just to pick up the phone, reestablish that contact, and go with them. We did go out with an RFP sort of process, obviously, but we ended up with Workday because we were quite familiar with it to begin with. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about fundamentally, like, what were you trying to solve for? And I think we have 5 points here.
We have 5 points. There was obviously loads of other stuff too, but like if we have to bring it down to 5 key areas, we are scale up. So in the name, it's already there. We're solving for scalability. There's a lot of organic and non-organic growth, for example, through acquisitions. And we needed a system that can help us building APIs and integrations. Then again, I said it a couple of times because it was such a big thing for us, but country-specific legal requirements, we were at the risk at breaching regulations. So again, we needed something that can support us within those different countries and build out specifically like absence and time tracking. Workflow complexity. So again, like this not just comes with the workflow itself, but also with different roles within the business. So perhaps you need someone that is a compensation manager that needs to approve every single compensation transaction that happens in the system. But we also had specific requirements between like departments, locations or countries where we just needed to be able to configure very simple, like very specific things for them to make it work. And also, like, just an ability to audit changes. We do a lot on Slack. We have a channel for almost everything. So you might notice if you work on Teams or Slack yourself a lot, but someone will message you, hey, can you quickly do this change? And you go in the system, you do this change, 5 months later, someone asks you, where does this come from? But you can't find the channel anymore. You don't know who asked you, and it's just very tricky to figure out what happened. So that was really important. Payroll integration, it's on the list. It's still on the list. And perhaps we'll come back next year and tell you about it. But yeah, this is definitely something we still want to solve for, but we also needed a system that can support us with it. The infrastructure in itself, so more automation, less workarounds, less admin essentially, to give our talents also within HR the possibility to work on cooler projects rather than sitting there and doing data entry.
Excellent. So that is in a concise way our use case essentially and the things that we were trying to solve for at GoStudent. This is the favorite part of the presentation for me, which is the 5 key learnings on what not to do given our experience. Please be smarter than us when implementing the HRIS, your HRIS platform. For those of you that put up your hands, we do have I think it's the top 5 of ways that you could potentially get burned. And so let's just get right into that.
Yeah, so there's a lot more learnings, but those were the 5 main ones, right? So let's start with the obvious one. Don't implement an HRIS and a payroll system at the same time. Sounds obvious, we did it anyway. It's really tricky because not only takes it, obviously, the focus away from like your own project, but also like payroll takes priority, right? Like that just makes it, specifically when it comes to your subject matter expert, they're going to be busy doing payroll on top of their like normal job. So that was a big learning. If I had to do it again, I would definitely try not to do this. I appreciate that sometimes, like in our case, it just happened and we couldn't really change it. But if you have the choice, do one thing at a time.
Yeah, the tendency here within our organization was to try to do everything all at the same time, which is lines up very well with like scale-ups, where we try to do as much as possible within the limited sort of like resources and time that we have. So why wait, essentially? So we fell into that trap, and if you can, stay away from it. Just try to do one thing at a time, do it well. It'll lead to less re-implementation, which is kind of where we are right now. Okay, the second point is resources. Within scale-ups, resources are always scarce. We are no different. And so if you can, try to split your resources however many numbers that you have. In our case, we had 1 in order to do this. And Elena was essentially a doer and a checker. If we were to provide you with a learning out of that exercise, it is to split your resources into doers, so those that pull data, sort of like refine data, configure workbooks, etc. Have those resources separated from those that are actually checking and validating the data and the build around the HRIS platform. In our case, we had it all within one resource, but if you can, try to split those two. It's very difficult to do both things at the same time. people data, it's complex, there's a lot of it, and you want your resources focused just on one side of that ledger. The other point, and for you, any CFOs in the audience or CEOs, please close your ears. Try to pad that budget as much as possible. There will be cost overruns, there will be time overruns. So if you can sneak a few extra euros into that budget, please do. It will come in handy when things potentially start to go a bit sideways, and you need a bit of buffer, essentially.
Right, next one, bring in your subject matter experts and understand your requirements. And I mean, not theoretically understand you need an absence plan for Austria with 25 days of holiday, but more like understand, is this a front-loaded plan? Is it a monthly accrual? You really need to get into this nitty-gritty of those requirements. It is not just we didn't have those SMEs, we did, but they were busy doing payroll. So there was a lot of answers that we just didn't get in time. So we had to build a few things on assumptions, which meant post-go-live, we had to re-implement a lot of that stuff to make it work for our business.
Okay, just two more. But they're important. Timing. In our particular case, we couldn't really line up the go-live date with the business cycle. It just didn't work out that way. Lena, remind me, how long did it take to implement Workday?
We did it in 7 months.
7 months, okay. Within 7 months, and at the end of that sort of 7 months with the go-live date, kind of lined up with our one of our heavy business cycles. And what ended up happening is it just got washed out. So the organization managers, talents, they're out trying to make numbers, for example, make their targets. They don't have time to sort of listen to us about what this fancy new Workday system is going to do for them and what their role is in this, particularly around manager self-service. We still get tickets around, can you do this and can you do that for us? Here's a Google Sheet with all the new information. And for us, this is like, no, because we launched this. You could do all of this yourself within Workday. A big learning and a way that we got burned was we lined it up with a major sort of business cycle event, and our message just got washed out, which meant we have to keep going back and reiterating the message that they can help themselves, essentially. Yeah?
Last point for today, and there is more, so if you want to talk about all the other learnings that we didn't put on the slide, you can find me later and talk about it. But not having HR programs in place, and this will look different depending on the size of your organization. So for us, as a startup, scale-up, it meant there wasn't anything written down yet, or we didn't have like programs in place, like job architecture, for example. And anyone who implemented a system like Workday will know you need that to an extent to get the system set up. So that meant I had to like make some stuff up, essentially, to get it into the system. For larger organizations, it's a really good opportunity to look at the programs you have in place and see if they're too complex, perhaps, or it's just evaluating what still is something that you actually do or you wanted to change up and all these kind of things. You really, if you can time it right, with your implementation, you could do that beforehand to have everything ready to go when the implementation starts.
We did not.
No.
Okay, but this point it's super important, not only for scale-ups or smaller organizations, but for larger organizations where there's just too complexity in the policies, and programs that you have in place, where it's just going to require a lot of effort, more money in terms of like configuring Workday or any other HRIS platform in order to make it fit. So knock-on effect here is look at your policies and programs, see how you can streamline them, potentially make them a bit more easier, and that should speed up sort of your configuration for an HRIS platform as well. Those are our 5 ways to get burned. So just to recap.
One thing at a time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
One thing at a time. Look at your resources. Bring in your SMEs. Timing and edge our programs.
Listen, that's our presentation. We are around for the next 2 days. We hope this was practical, tips that you could use in your HR life with your organizations. And that's it for us. I think we're going to take a question or two now as well. Thanks.
Thank you.